Everybody like, hey, are you ready to go? Ready to go? Everybody like, hey.
Alright, what is up y'all? Soul here and welcome back to my story mode. Now we are going to do things as per usual. I am going to have a couple of things to talk about before we get into the actual point of the video, but I'm going to ask you guys to do me a little favor first. I'm going to politely ask that you go ahead and drop a like on this video if you like this type of content. Don't worry, we're gonna get back to the regular type of content that you guys originally came for very soon, which is all the speculations and breakdowns and things like that. However, as somebody that does not have an uncle that works at Nintendo, I can only do so much in that regard. And also the fun debate kind of style videos that we've been doing for the last couple weeks here have been pretty fun for me. I enjoy talking about this kind of thing. But that's all in that regard. I just want to know if you guys actually enjoy this type of content as well. Anyhow, why don't we go ahead and move into the first couple of things that I needed to say. First off, why did not a single one of you argue when I asked a question that clearly implies that Pokemon Sword and Shield was the worst Pokemon generation? I bring this up because I find it funny that I don't even believe in that. I just phrased it that way because if I said what was the worst Pokemon generation, 90% of you would have just said 8th gen. That's all on that though, I just brought it up because I kind of find that hilarious. Now the next thing, trust me, I am more than aware that you guys meant 6th gen and not 5th gen when clicking on that option in the poll. I could only fit so many options into that poll separately before I was limited, so I had to group them together. Hence why I always ask you guys to put your actual opinions in the comments below. So don't worry, I'm fully aware that if you picked the one that said 5th or 6th gen, you probably meant 6th gen. I put that "or" there for a reason. Moving along here, the last thing that I really wanted to say is that I actually am finally getting into live streaming soon. And obviously I've had a couple ideas as to what I would like to live stream with you guys first. Within the next day or so, I'd like to set up a poll with options so that you guys could choose what we live stream first. And even if one does win out over the others, it doesn't mean that the others are completely out of the question. We'll just do those at a later time. So I just wanted to put that bug in your ear. For the next couple of days, just keep an eye out for that poll, and the sooner that we can get that voted on, the sooner that I can finish setting up, the sooner we can get started on streaming. Because I think we'll have a lot of fun. But anyway, I think that's enough on that. But speaking of polls, why don't we get into the actual main point of the video? About a week ago, I asked all of you what the weakest generation was before Generation 8. And of course, with a question like that came many differing opinions. So why don't we go ahead and hop into it. Let's see what you guys decided was the worst generation besides Generation 8. Let's start off with Dr. Love, who says Gen 6. There was so much potential for X and Y and none of it was delivered on. You know what, bro? I can absolutely get behind that. Going into X and Y, we had a lot of expectations because it was the first true 3D mainline game. It also gave us our introduction to gimmicks. And I've gotta say, that was a pretty damn good start too, considering the fact that Mega Evolution is considered the best of the gimmicks that we have so far. It was also our first true introduction to custom characters in Pokemon, because that is something that we've definitely been needing for a long time. But unfortunately, it has to be admitted that while it did improve in some areas when it came to Pokemon as a series, it definitely fell short in some areas too. The story for me was downright straight up forgettable, to be honest with you. It took me a hot minute to remember that Team Flare was actually a thing, and even then I had to look up what their actual goal was. And even that can be summed up in a sentence. The world isn't good enough, so let's make it better by destroying everything. If it sounds at all familiar, that's because it is. Difference is, Cyrus was doing it a hell of a lot better. The only reason that I can even remember Lysander's name is because of how dumb I remember that it was. That dude needed to worry less about fixing the world and more on fixing his hair. I understand the design choice, I do, but when I don't care for a character like that, I'm gonna start judging their looks a lot harder. Aside from him though, Team Flare is really where teams took a nosedive for the Pokemon series. This is where they started to really become less of a threat and more of just a general nuisance. I can't think of one significant thing that Team Flare has done that's even remotely memorable besides maybe taking over the Pokeball Factory. And the only reason I even remember that is because the Pokeball Factory theme music was fire! How do you go from Gen 5 where they literally froze over an entire city just to get what they wanted, to a team that took over the Pokeball factory where Pokeballs are made and did literally nothing with it. That's insane to me. And then there's the legendaries Yveltal and Xerneas that have literally nothing to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're probably very strong and they have their reasons for being born, but the life and death Pokemon? I feel like we kind of already have that with Arceus and Giratina. But hey, maybe that could just be the Gen 4 lover in me coming out. Long story short, these Pokemon do nothing for me. And then there was the whole perfect setup for Pokemon Z, because we were in the era of sequels, so we were fully expecting that middle game, especially considering the fact that Zygarde was a real Pokemon. And don't get me wrong, Oras was fine, I enjoyed Oras. But why would you set that up like that just to do nothing with it? Zygarde is an entire Pokemon with like 3 different forms that are very powerful in their own ways, but we don't get a story that focuses on that at all. Why? Whatever the case may be, X and Y as a whole showcase some of the biggest wasted potential in the Pokemon series to date. Moving along here, Valley Medelt says, Gen 6, what is with the gym leader's Pokemon only having 3 moves? And not too far from that one, Cock Pikachu says, it's Gen 6. That one really felt like baby's first Pokemon game. Hell, none of the gym leaders have full movesets, and the Elite Four went from having 5 Pokemon to only having 4. Yeah, they really held out on us with that one, didn't they? That right there is kind of what tells me that they really hit the reset button when it came to Gen 6. And what I mean by that is that this is where they really expected a lot of newcomers to start playing the game. All these kids getting their brand new 3DSs on Christmas expecting a brand new Pokemon game to play, they couldn't risk scaring them away with difficulty. They had to tone it down a little bit. And to an extent, I can understand that. I get it, I do. However, you shouldn't hold off every trainer in the game from having 6 Pokemon, especially by the end of it when you yourself have a full team of 6 ready to mollywop. I mean, come on, what's the whole point of training up your Pokemon if you have nothing to battle? Especially if we're talking about the Elite Four, who are supposed to be the strongest trainers in the region. Is them having 3 to 4 Pokemon on my first run through the championship supposed to be them going easy on me? No! Why would you do that? I think that the worst part is that I can't even remember any of the Elite Four members' names. Or the types that they used for that matter. I guess that I washed them so fast that they were just easy to forget. And that right there is the true tragedy. Moving right along here, we have Gravity the Ghost, who says, Gen 6 had the potential to be one of the best, but was held back due to virtually no difficulty and lack of long-term post-game. But Gen 2 is weakest in my opinion. If it didn't have Kanto as a crutch, it would be by far the worst generation in the series. You know what? I couldn't agree more, Chief. I'm sure that a lot of you know me pretty decently by now. I'm very much a story guy. But obviously that did not happen to me overnight. At a younger age, I obviously prioritized gameplay over anything. I liked Pokemon. That was a Pokemon game that I could play, so I played Pokemon. I'm now older and have a general grasp on the ins and outs of storytelling. So after my recent playthrough of Pokemon Heart Gold Soul Silver, I can say with complete comfort that there is no story in 2nd Gen. The evil team was just a residue of Team Rocket. Silver was just an asshole rival whose story you had to learn outside of the games that didn't even really have a redemption arc. And the legendary Pokemon were more or less just activated. The Kimono sisters that have been following you throughout the game just deemed you worthy enough to calm them down when the time was right. That's just a complete random mesh of events just mashed together. And like homie said, its primary crutch was the fact that we could revisit Kanto. You remember Kanto, right? The region that we were just in before that one? Come on now. I know that Kanto being an addition to the game probably wasn't meant to be some kind of crutch, but if it feels that way to the player, that means that the main game didn't really have much to offer to begin with. Now don't get me wrong, Heart Gold and Soul Silver was presented beautifully. The music, the atmosphere, and just general vibes of Heart Gold Soul Silver are debatably even better than that of Diamond Pearl or Platinum. But it should not have felt like I was waiting the entire game for something to finally start. The most story-driven thing that I can remember coming from that game was going to the Team Rocket's secret base with Lance and taking down everybody. which took probably less than an hour or two. I mean, if anything, they could have at least made Team Rocket more of a threat, but if anything, it was more of a joke. We ran into the main boss of remade Team Rocket, and he gave up after one battle. He really said, okay, alright, that's enough, you're right, no more Team Rocket, we're through, goodbye. And he just walked out. I don't even think he got arrested. That's crazy. That's crazy. Whatever the case may be, if Gen 2 were reintroduced in any other generation besides 4 and didn't have Kanto as a crutch, it would definitely be regarded as the weakest Pokemon game of all time. Or at the very least, maybe that's just my take, because personally, that's where my vote goes. Next up, we have High-Priced Maniac that says, I just wish that they didn't get rid of all the cool features starting with Gen 5. Gen 4 had everything, and that was the last we have seen of some things such as the Battle Frontier. You know, you might be right on that front, but I really couldn't tell you because it's simply been that long since I've actually played through Gen 5. Honestly, I think that they just introduced the right mechanics at the right time for us. I could not even begin to calculate how much time I spent in the underground. And getting my ass absolutely handed to me in the Battle Frontier was unmatched. On the other hand, with Gen 5, I can't say that there was a lot of memorable after game besides maybe that final battle with Cynthia, but again, it's just been that long. However, the fact that the story did as well as it did to stick with me for this long kinda puts it on a bit of a higher scale when it comes to Pokemon for me. Next up, Capo says, Gen 7. Gen 5 was good and Gen 6 brought back the hype with the anime and megas. Okay, I'll give you one thing, Gen 5 was definitely good. And you're also kinda right when it comes to Gen 6. Megas were definitely a well-needed change of pace, and as far as the anime goes, I can't lie to you, I don't care much for the first half of the anime, but that last half definitely hit a little different. I honest to God hate that it was called Ash Greninja, but I will say this, it put in more work than most teams Ash has had up to that point. But moving back on topic, you said that Gen 7 was the weakest. I'll be honest with you, it's a little hard for me to place where Gen 7 stands with me. On one hand, it was a very fun experience. They introduced a lot of new different things like Alolan type Pokemon and Z-moves. And you know what? There was definitely a lot more memorable characters in that one than I could say for Gen 6. And I'm pretty sure that's because there was definitely a lot more story going on in that one. Lusamine was kind of a monster. And comparing Gladion and Lily to a lot of other characters in the Pokemon series, I gotta say, they at least developed a little bit. I'll give credit where credit's due. However though, on the other hand, Team Skull was completely underutilized. The championship battle was very forgettable in both Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Moon being a problem in of itself. And the more I think about it, Z-moves might be a worse mechanic than Dynamaxing. As of right now, I really couldn't tell you exactly how I feel about that generation overall. Maybe one of these days I'll pick it back up again and do a genuine playthrough, and then we'll probably talk about it down the line. But as of right now, I couldn't tell you. Next along here, Antonio Jose says X and Y may have been underwhelming in terms of combat, but it has one of the best, if not the best, atmosphere and music of any Pokemon game. I don't know about the atmosphere. I don't know about that one. And I am definitely not gonna sit here and say that it has the best music when Gen 4 is right there. However, it definitely has some good ass music and it absolutely has some of its bangers too. Like I said earlier in the video, the Pokeball Factory theme, absolute heat. And while this doesn't necessarily apply, some of the remixes that I've heard for this game's music, mwah, muy caliente, phenomenal. Gen 6 definitely has its downsides, but its music is not one of them. Next along here, Pandastical says, Gen 6 is saved by ORAS, but Gen 7 saw Pokemon Go Switch Edition and games launched in an obviously incomplete state. I wouldn't necessarily say that Gen 6 was completely in danger without Gen 3 remakes, but they did definitely help. On the other hand, what games are you referring to when you say that they were launched in a not complete state? What are we talking about? Are we talking about regular Gen 7 or Ultra Sun and Moon? Cause for the most part, I'm pretty sure they were complete, or at the very least, they thought that they were complete considering that Game Freak re-released the exact same game a year later. Or are you talking about Let's Go? Cause like I've said a couple of times here, I'm not even sure if we can count Pokemon Let's Go as a Gen 7 game. I mean, true enough, it did release before Gen 8 did, but It was just another remake of first gen. Difference was, this time, there was literally no HMs and none of the Pokemon from second gen on available. It was literally just first gen. And if you're referring to those games, what exactly do you mean by incomplete? If you're referring to all the missing mechanics from that game, they did that on purpose. We were not fans of that decision, but it was implemented on purpose. I don't know, I just don't think I understand what you're telling me here. But let's try not to get too hung up on it. Next up, JGR says, Gen 4 was the slow pinnacle of Pokemon. Let's be real, everything we love about Johto is how Heart Gold Soul Silver made it better. You know what, it's kinda hard to argue. For its time, definitely the pinnacle. It's also pretty hard to argue that the original Gen 2 is better than the remakes. At the end of the day, yeah, it was just a better version. There's really not much to argue here. Next, Yuan Jones says, Gens 1 and 2, they are mechanically and functionally just not as good as the others. Yes, they are the oldest and the first, but there's better places to play these games now. I mean, yeah, you're not entirely wrong, but I feel like that one kinda depends on who you ask. Bigger doesn't always necessarily mean better. You'd be surprised as to how many people prefer Gen 1 or 2 over any game that's released in the past decade or so. For them, it's clearly not a matter of mechanics, they just enjoyed the experience in those games a lot better. They are outdated and definitely built simple, I cannot argue that. But hey, somebody might simply prefer those games because they offered a challenge that current games just don't give us anymore. It really depends on the person. But anyhow, next up we have the Nintendo gamer with a big one here. He says, my first game was Black and White too, but I have the most nostalgia for Gen 6. I think that Sun and Moon was actually way worse than X and Y. Sun and Moon felt soulless because I feel like they were made more for money than for the passion. Even with the existence of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, it's better, but it doesn't fix the big issues with Alola. Hell, you know what? I'll take it a step further, homie. I'm gonna go as far as to say that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon did even more injustice for this series than the originals ever did. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon pisses me off for a couple of reasons, and one of them is exactly what you brought up. Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is through and through a cash grab and nothing more. Instead of touching up on previous issues that the last couple of games had, they decided, nah, let's just hammer some story stuff in and call it a day. They could not be bothered to fix anything because they knew that the game would make them money anyways. And that right there is really what hurt Gen 7. That was the beginning of the downfall, so to speak. That game's existence was a problem for everybody because that's where the Pokemon Company truly came to understand that they could put out whatever they want and fans will buy that because it has the Pokemon title. And that right there was truly a damn shame and is really gonna hurt us going forward with the series if we don't keep vocalizing our problems with the games. I'll say it like this, the original games, Sun and Moon, were fine on their own. I enjoyed them a lot. But Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon was an actual problem. So the way that I'm reading this is that Gen 6 is basically better simply because it had a hell of a lot more to offer than Gen 7 did. And if that's how you believe it, I don't blame you in the slightest. Anyhow, finally, because a lot of these answers are pretty much the same, Noobstoy says, Gen 6, not including ORAS, was pretty lacking in adventure, story, region, and just general content that made the games pretty bad. X and Y needed more time or DLC to finish them. That's a very valid argument, buddy. You could hold me at gunpoint and tell me to name any of the character rival friends that you had, and I'd just tell you to shoot me. Pull the trigger, cause I could not remember for the life of me. If there is at least one solid thing that all of us can agree on at the end of the day, it's the fact that the biggest thing that X and Y had going for it was Mega Evolution. And that's pretty much it. And if we're being completely honest here, I'm actually kinda glad that we didn't get a Pokemon Z over 3rd gen remakes. There's no guarantee that a Pokemon Z would have done literally anything for that generation. Zygarde definitely deserved better, but there is no guarantee that a better ever would have happened. So for the most part, I think that just about wraps up what you guys believe is the worst generation for Pokemon. The poll does say Gen 7 when you actually look at it, however, the real answer is actually Gen 6. However, that is simply because I could not add more answers to that poll. I got limited, and in turn I limited you guys, so I'm super sorry for that. We'll try to work it out in a much better fashion next time something like this comes around. But do not worry, I understand that you guys picked Gen 6, not Gen 5. I know, I would have done the exact same thing. Just trust me when I say, when I'm down in the comments, I'm not kidding. But now that truly does end this video right here, but I still want to hear more of your guys' opinions on each of the generations of Pokemon. Is there any other Pokemon game that just did not suit your fancy? Hell, there's no way that Gen 3 or 4 or even 5 were necessarily perfect, now were they? I'm here to hear it all, so put it down in the comments and I'll be right down there with you. But with that, I'ma skedaddle on out of here. Thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the absolute greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and I hope to see you guys in the next video and for my live streams coming up very, very soon, within the next week or so. I hope to see you all there. But anyway, I'm out. Thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time.